Anyway, I'm young McQueen, if you forgot. This presentation is going to have a very short first part and a middle part that's the subject of what I'm supposed to talk about. And then a third part, what I'm probably not supposed to talk about. Now, if you need to sleep, sleep in the middle part. Okay. This is not my picture. It's just to set the size correctly. Do I have to be closer? It was working. You know, plug it in and no, it won't work. Plug it in and replug it. Why is it not working? It worked and worked and worked and worked.
Power technology. Press one, you'll try the other one. Or you can just tell them to advance. I'll do it.
Okay, timing is going to be critical though.
Okay.
If you press the button, it works. You don't hear it forward. Just, which do you return or what? Should it work now?
I don't know.
It worked for. Okay, it'll probably be obvious, but
Yep.
we have a problem because the clicker is not working now. It worked when we tested it. We have roughly 250 slides, so it's not going to be as smooth as we would like it. So accept my apology before we begin. Okay, we're going to start with I noticed your professional talkers who come here, they have an opening thing where they show you their work and they tell you all the awards and everything they've done. So I've taken that half hour, 20 minutes, it's down to 3 minutes. Okay, so you're going to have to bear with me. Okay. One more. I am an award-winning photographer. This image I submitted in 1955 to the Brantford Star, which was the local weekly for this town that had a population of 873 in 2022. In 1955, I think it was 300. I'm a professional photographer. I sold this image to the University of, that's just my finger pointing, it's not my pointing to go forward. We're having to coordinate. I sold this image to the state of Florida, University of Florida, their dental school. I'm a street photographer. This is a picture of a street. I'm a photographer of celebrities. The boy that's in the arms of the old man, that's Louis Gossett Sr. This is the boy of AI. Senior photographer. Headshot photographer. Now, I'm a family photographer, but I didn't know if I should be my family or your family. You can make assumptions. I'm a real estate and architecture photographer. Uh-oh. I have to give credit to Scott Kelby for this. And my awards, my trophies, my ribbons, my plaques. This is a wall in my house, and I call it the Wall of Honor. My wife calls it the Wall of Hubris, but I'm not sure what hubris meant. I think it's French for excellent. and major. That's a fancy French word. It means all the work you've done during your life. And we'll go through each one of these separately, but I just wanted to show you the expansion. And these are just my 6-star winners. Okay, I assume you knew that was a parody, right? Do I have to tell you? Okay. This lady, name is Maggie Thatcher. She said, being powerful is like being a lady. If they have to tell people you are, then you aren't. But she said something else too. She said, if someone has to tell you they're a great photographer, they aren't. Go ahead. So I've titled this Confessions of a Photography Judge. Questions? Yes, please. The first section we're titling 3 Pillars of Photo Judging. Now, almost every judge gets instructions from a club or whoever's doing it, and they will tell the judge to judge these 3 categories of stuff: impact, composition, technical. They may have different words, but essentially, this is what it is. Impact is easy to sense. You just know when it's there. It's your instinct telling you this is a great photograph. You've seen this before? You've seen this before. This is one of Weston's bell peppers. This is a picture from the St. Augustine Club. This was taken with a long lens and it compacted the image, but you can tell the high contrast gives it a high impact. Impact. Oh, judges generally call these snapshots. That's not a compliment. Anybody know the photographer who took this picture? Oh, Bill knows. Anybody else? Oh, wait. You know where it is? Where? Very good. And Bill knows who photographed it. Right. It makes you feel good to know that some of your pictures look like some of Ansel Adams, right? Okay, impact, people to people. More people to people. People to viewer. Animal to animal. Animal to a viewer. Now, keep in mind this one, the bird is not looking at you. This bird is. Difference? Person to a machine, in this case, a guitar. This is Weston and his view camera. Composition is our second pillar. This one is a little longer. Go ahead. Fibonacci was an Italian mathematician, and he's well known in circles for the Fibonacci sequence, which is simply a sequence of numbers, which is each number is the sum of the 2 preceding numbers. Not really important that you know, but what's important is that as you run this numbers out, you end up with 2 numbers next to each other that are approaching what's known as the golden ratio. It's 1 to 1.6. That's enough accuracy for photographers, trust me. And you further study Fibonacci, it leads you into rule of thirds, the golden ratio, as we mentioned, and the golden rectangle. Compositions Keep your horizons level. Judges like to look for things that are easy to judge, and this is one, so don't give them any gifts. Now, how do you level a horizon when you can't see the horizon? Well, you could either try to find a vertical or use your feeling for it. This picture is purposely not level. This is where creativity comes in. Now, some judges will appreciate what you're doing, some won't. The better you get as a photographer, the more trouble you're going to have with judges, because you're thinking at a different level than they are. And if they're following the rules only, then you may get a negative feeling towards some of them. This is Gary Winogrand. You knew that, didn't you, Bill? Yes. Anyway, he's famous for having horizons that are not level. All the elements of composition come down to points, lines, shapes. You notice that eye goes to the point of the mountains. Lines we're dealing with leading lines. Here, you got a backward S. Sorry. Every time I make a motion, you think this lines lead us essentially to nowhere. So I would try to avoid this, or don't enter it, really, is what I'm saying. But one more event. Now, I'm going to show you a next image. I know some of you all will be afraid of these. So if you want to turn away, I understand. 1, 2, 3. But if you think about it, you can get it down to, does my picture have leading lines, and do I have a clown in it? Clown meaning anything that's going to be of interest to me. You see how the 3 lines here line up? The face of the mother, the face of the baby, and the arm of the mother. And I look at the arm hanging down. It doesn't feel right. Shapes. Circles, ovals. You know, an oval is just a circle viewed from an angle. Triangles, rectangles, squares, truncated pyramids, whatever you have with 4 sides. Look at the triangles in this image. Look at the background, mountains, triangles, midground, triangle. Circles and ovals. We're going very fast because we're going to cover a lot of territory in a relatively small amount of time. I know this is a little difficult, but we'll try to slow down when we get to the fun stuff. Look at all the circles. Look at her hat, another circle. Look at all the triangles and rectangles and squares in this. And if you take these shapes and you multiply them and they're in a pattern, then that's what you get, a pattern. Patterns and leading lines. Leading lines can also be leading shapes. Like in this case, the pier structure is leading us. The composition, the goal, really what we're doing is, in the bottom line, we're taking a 3-dimensional object, we're photographing it, and then we're trying to make it look like a 3-dimensional object. When we photograph it, we've only got 2 dimensions. Size is one of our tools. Something bigger, closer to you, something farther away is smaller. Saturation and sharpness will bring things forward. As it gets farther away, it looks more hazy, less contrast. Notice that the character in this comes forward because it's sharper. Look at the rock to his right, sharper, comes forward. You want something to be somewhat static, put it in the middle of your frame. Notice here, they're off center, more dynamic. Warm colors come forward, cool colors go back. Balance. When you read composition books, they will show you how to calculate balance and look at this balance with that. Never worked for me, but I think what does work is just get the feeling. You can feel if an image is in balance or not. Also, you may not want it to be in balance. You're the artist that's working with these images. Balance. Not so much, but photographer here doesn't want balance. They got a character running out of the frame. Symmetry. Judges love to judge symmetry because you know why? It's so easy to find flaws in it. So if you're going to do it really, really well. Because if you're an inch off, they'll notice it. Another example of symmetry. Framing. What's the most famous image you can think of that's framing something? Anybody? Bill? Nothing? I think it's the following. You know exactly what it is, and you can't not look where they want you to look. June the 6th, Normandy. Space really has positive and negative aspects. We talk more about negative space because positive space just has something in it. Now, generally what we're talking about is a relationship between, when we say negative space, we're talking about something that's not so much there and there's a more prominent something in the positive part. So I know there's always things in negative space. It's not empty, it's just not visible so much. You notice how this character stands out in this huge area. And the ship seems insignificant. But it wouldn't seem insignificant without all the negative space. Another example. That one's very lucky to catch the bird doing that at the same moment with the two people in the boat. Makes you suspicious, doesn't it? Vertical perspective. I'm not going to talk about 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective and all that, because first of all, it's really boring. And second of all, we don't really have time for it. But I would like to talk about vertical perspective because it's very easy. This is how we normally photograph kids at the beach or family and such. We stand and shoot and tell them to smile or whatever. But look at the difference in the next picture. We've gotten down low, we've got on their level, and look what happened to the background. It cleaned up too. All from perspective. Bird photography has its own world. You could do hours on bird photography, but in general, you want to shoot birds if you can from their level. Now, what's the big, this is beautifully sharp, but there's a bird photography wise, a little bit of a, I was leaving the subject a second, but what's the overwhelming problem with this picture? Anybody? Yes, thank you. Birds were overlapping. You want your birds separated. That's one of the rules that a bird photography will ding you on. It doesn't mean your image is going to lose. It just means that an image that has the birds separated will score higher. Yeah. You see what happens when you photograph up? Look at how many political figures in their ads. They have pictures showing up. In portrait photography, you call that up the nostrils, which you really try to avoid. This is only one side on cropping. And there are people who preach against it. I understand them, but I'm not one of them. And I don't think cropping is a 4-letter word. You're wondering why the D is cropped off? No. Did you notice the D was cropped off? Yes, okay. I just want you to feel this image. I'm not going to say anything about it. Yes. Speed up. Talk louder or okay. Okay, you look at the image, I'm gonna get a sip of water. Which one? Go back one. Yes. Oh, I said cropping is not a four-letter word. That's all I said. It's just a pretty picture for you to look at while I'm saying cropping is not a four-letter word. It's a pretty picture, right? What artist is this mimicking? Bill doesn't know because he's a photographer. No, the one before. What does that look? What painter is that? There you go, Gustav Klimt. That's what AI can do. Creates Gustav Klimt look. You like this picture, I assume, but you feel it, right? You feel it, just nothing wrong with it. Okay, technical. In technical, we're talking color, sharpness, noise, contrast, exposure, and the quality of post-production. Color. We describe color with three attributes. Hue, which is what we would say, it's greenish blue. This is actually what we think of as the color. Chroma or saturation, purity of the color from being very gray into being very brilliant or saturated. Tone and value, lightness, darkness. Tone and value are different words for the same thing. Yeah, chroma and saturation also. This is a sample of an image that has a low saturation, a low contrast look. Now, judges will prefer the next image, but if you have reasons that you're doing something and this is the effect you want, then stick with it. Don't let the judge, you should never be photographing for the judge unless you're just doing something to enter. You always want to be photographing for yourself. You please yourself with your work. If you're not pleased with it, doesn't matter whether you win or not. And black and white is just tone, brightness and darkness. That's all it is. This is a tool from Adobe. It's free. color.adobe.com. It's a tool to go in and play with colors, different kind of what they call harmonies. Very educational. If you're not aware of it, I would play there a lot. It's really fun. There are two color systems. One is light, which is RGB, and that's our televisions, our phones, our monitors of our computers. When we're printing something, we're in CMYK, which is they call subtractive. Additive is light. Now, if you look inside your color printer, you're wondering, why aren't there RGB colored inks in here? Because you're not in that system, you're in CMYK. Anybody know what the K stands for? What does the K stand for, though? I know K means black, but what does it stand for? Why a K? No one agrees. There's two theories. One is that they use a word called key, and they key to the black when they're printing, has to do with the registration stuff, or it's the last letter of the word black, because they don't want to use B because B is used for blue. So they don't know which one is right. This is an RGB color wheel. Why do I need to know that? Well, if you want to have a picture with harmonious colors, choose colors that are close together. If you want contrast, choose colors that are across from the opposite on the wheel. This is, see how close they are together? See how the green stands out from the red? Colors of Christmas. Every retailer of TVs has their saturation set, to my eye, ridiculously high. I don't really know why, but they do. And what you wonder is, how many people take these home and leave them there, leave them set that way? It's just, I consider this picture oversaturated, and I think it would get deemed badly by a judge. This is pretty radical, I think. This is a picture by Matt Kokowski. A lot of you know him. It's from his website. This is about as saturated as you want to go to keep a natural look, I think. Once you go cranking it up beyond this, it starts looking unreal. Sharpness. In landscape photography, they will tell you everything should be sharp. Generally speaking, it's true. Eyes and animals and people should be sharp. The bluebird obviously was sharp when I looked at it, but not so much sharp now. You can use sharpness to change your image and what you want people to look at, what you want them to ignore, what you want them to see and be interested in. Use it as a design tool. Here, everything is sharp except the stem. Part of this flower is sharp. Some of it isn't. This is artistic. This is artistic choice for the photographer. Here you have one flower sharp, the others aren't. It sets it apart. This is using a vignette and sharpness to center in on the flower itself. Who knows what this flower is? Flower of what? Say it again, you got it right. Coffee, yes, thank you. Contrast, high, low. Exposure. Virtually nothing in this picture is exposed correctly. Blown out or underexposed. Keep in mind, if you overexpose, those pixels are gone. There's nothing there, so you cannot recover them. They're gone forever. Noise. Don't we all love it? Sometimes you add noise to a picture if you're trying to do something like get an effect of grain or something. So it's not always bad. It's bad when you don't control it though. This is over processing. See the halo on the right-hand side? Dead giveaway. Feel the crunchiness of the saturation of the texture. So this usually will get you dinged by the judge pretty badly. So these were the three pillars: impact, composition, and technical. Now, this is no way teaching you these subjects. This is merely giving you a roadmap so you can go back and spend hours on each one of these subjects if you don't know this stuff already. The ones of you that are sleeping, I know you know it already. But we talk like this is like a tripod. I don't think that way. I think more what it really is impact is really the important thing, and technical and composition are supporting players. That's just my opinion. Let's talk a little bit about portraits. But judges love to take pictures like this and tell you your subject's not giving me anything. Every portrait doesn't have to be of a smiling person, but you're trying to give a message out. You may want the figure smiling, you may want them doing this. It's your choice. I will tell you, there are a lot of apps out there that will do finishing, face finishing, that kind of stuff. And most of them have adjustments, and they have a very viable purpose for professionals like wedding photographers, because they cannot go in and take 1,000 pictures and do individual upgrading and skin softening and stuff like that. But when you go so far that your texture of the skin is gone, you can expect the judge not to be happy, or they may be elated because they just aren't that familiar with portraits. But Scott Kelby will go on for hours on this subject, this very subject. I know the guy that talked last year, he was dinging country music. So I know y'all don't know who this is, but see how the bright spots on the bottom and top and the arm. Now, judges will like to criticize that because the details are blown out and that's pulling attention away from the face. So just be aware, if you're going to have this and you know that your judge is interested in those things, then just tone them down. When my grandchildren were 3, 4 years old, they had already developed a photo smile. And every picture that you see of them that was posed has exactly the same smile. Every single one, year after year. And this, I said, let me find an example on a commercial photographer who's advertising for senior portraits. And the first hit, this is 7 pictures. There were more. And it's the same. Now, if you're in business to sell senior pictures and this is what your client wants, not dinging you. But if you're trying to get a portrait of a person, this is the surface. This is what they're showing the world. They're hiding behind this. How to get something real. This woman is smiling with her eyes, and her smile is following it. She's not leading with her mouth. I'm going to show you a few slides, and I'm not going to comment anything. I'm just going to show them to you and then move on. I want you to visualize, though, that Chris O'Quinn was a member of your camera club. Other stuff. You will hear constantly in photography clubs about out of the camera unprocessed. First of all, there's no such thing, because cameras have sensors that capture raw data. If you looked at that raw data, then someone might say, show me the raw image. You're not seeing the raw image. The raw image is code. It's all it is, it's code. You see, what you see when you think you're seeing a raw image, you're seeing a JPEG interpretation of the raw image created by the camera with an algorithm that the makers of that camera wrote. Now, they also can go in and you can set your settings in your camera to change that algorithm to make it look more concentrated, more this, more that. But this is an iPhone picture, and it was not processed. It was absolutely out of the camera. So this is kind of a message to people running contests and to judges and to y'all too. When you're faced with that situation, I don't know how you can do it. It's a take back to the days of film because we did have negatives, you know. But even then, people like Ansel, they were messing with the negatives, just like the camera messes with the pixels. You say, gosh, that's a pretty picture. It's in focus and it's got nice contrast. And yes, it is. But what's wrong with it is the person was walking around. They said, oh, that's pretty. Click. Kept on walking. They're not telling me what they want me to look at. And to a judge, it's really boring. And boring means it's not going to get a ribbon unless there are worse pictures. It's not a bad picture, though. I'm telling you, it's not a bad picture, but it's a picture that generally notes someone who's getting started. Look at the difference now. You can read this in several ways. You got a classic Art Deco design in the back in the Chrysler Building, and modern architecture on the other side, or you've got framing of the picture of the Chrysler Building. Anyway, but it's a much more inviting picture. Interesting shapes and designs inside of a house. Look at the care that was taken and how it was framed. It wasn't just walk up, take a snapshot, walk away. I want to talk about image titles. It's a very frustrating subject sometimes. Here's the problem. You title your something because you want the judge to understand something about the picture. This is your chance to talk to the judge. But if you go to a contest where the judge is going to look at 1,000 images, not going to pay much attention to the title. It's just not going to happen. So sometimes you're stuck. You want to either not enter it in that contest or enter it where you have more attention just to an individual picture. I think this is a great title, Angel on Ice. Makes you look beyond her just being a skater. This photographer titled this, I Heart You. It's not I love you. And not, oh, I'm bringing a twig for my nest. No. It's bringing attention to the shape of the vine that was in the bird's mouth. Now, will the judge see it? Probably not. Max and I spell redux differently. I don't know who's right, but he'll tell me, I'm sure. I shot this. I was at the beach practicing on gulls and not paying much attention to anything else. And I had stopped and I turned around, and there's a dune situation here. And I saw these kids running in the dune. Well, you know, you live in Florida, you know, it's not allowed. That's a crime. So I just shot it thinking I'm doing crime photography. So I took pictures, and it was on rapid mode because I was shooting birds in flight. So I boom, 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 and they ran up and then they were gone. I brought it home, ignored it, put it away. Months later, I'm looking for stuff to delete, finding a lot, by the way. And I come on this picture and it just flashes back to me. That's the summer of 42. Here, this is the opening shot of the movie. Three guys running up the dune. Do you see the sand fence there? And this cottage, this is Dorothy's cottage. And in this picture, we got both elements. I am like, well, wow. Look, I put it in the contest, summer of 42 redux. Redux, I looked up the word, it was some fancy way of saying coming back or something. Anyway, nothing. And the problem is, I need to find a judge who had a crush on Jennifer O'Neill. And that wasn't listed in any of their things. So sometimes you have to take your sometimes pictures are personal and you just have to keep them that way and they don't play well in the competition world. Everybody wants to take pictures like this and give them phony cliche names. Please don't do it. You know what you're thinking. This image has no need of a title. But I wouldn't enter it in a contest. Can everybody see it? Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, it is a little value. I didn't think of that. This is a picture where without the title, the image doesn't mean anything. Now, the title is Agnes, how's the diet coming? Now it has meaning. There's a concept in Japanese art called wabi-sabi. It essentially is getting beauty from something that is broken or flawed. Like this rose with the eaten away petals at the corner. I would not submit images like this because your judge is not going to be on board with this. They're just going to look at this and say, it would have been nice if it wasn't for a bad flower. I don't know why they put it in the contest. So you can get too sophisticated for your judge. Keep in mind, judges are pretty. Okay, back up one, can you? I'm sorry. These items all need foreground to make them worthwhile. Otherwise, please don't enter them. Tons of these things get entered in contests and they're all the same. Just rainbows by themselves. Sunsets and sunrises with nothing else. Milky Ways with nothing in the foreground.
Oh, see, this is a good point.
Moonshots,
Yeah.
eclipses.
This is
Look
good.
at this eclipse shot. This is a recent eclipse and it's won first place. Not because of the eclipse, because of the plane. Foreground.
This is excellent.
You've seen this before? This is dramatic. This is an award-winning picture. Now, it was being sold as not a composite, but some very clever YouTubers did some research and they found another picture from the same artist with the same moonshot with a different foreground, which is not possible. Also, if you look at the moon, the first one, there are clouds behind the moon. That's hard to pull off. And this is what I call judge fatigue. These things are photographed so oftenly, entered into contests so oftenly. If you're going to do one of these, you got to do something special. You can't just snap it and submit it. Monument Valley. And I know it's hard to get here. I know it's hot or sweaty or cold and it's miles of trekking. I don't care. Portland, like this thing gets, oh, Machu Picchu from this place, from this view, on a clear day, right? Yes, slot canyons. I know you had to sweat, you had to wait. Trek was horrible. The guy is making you wait while other people are in your way. You finally get a clear shot. I know. This is called Racetrack. It's in Death Valley. That's a hard place to get to too. And these things go off all the time now, and having one is not rare or unusual. It's almost like a car takes off from a traffic light. Not going to win awards usually. Now, things that we have problems judging. A rare moment captured, which is valuable. I appreciate it. This is an old picture of some people sitting around dinner, and there's roughly nothing remarkable about it until you look at this guy named Nixon's expression. And you can almost think what he's thinking. First of all, they didn't bother teaching him how to hold chopsticks. And second, he's wondering, is this edible or not? Am I supposed to eat this or is this part of the decoration? Because a lot of times you don't know. But it's not a great picture, but I'm sure this picture made a lot of money for the photographer. Can you imagine catching this moment? This is a wildcat grabbing a heron in midair. But it's a lousy picture. I want to cry. I said, come over, you gotta, how do you grade it? I don't know. I actually don't know. It depends on what's around it, I guess. Now, Joe McNally was very lucky when this baby gave him a gift. But I can't help but wonder, did Joe McNally stick out his tongue to the baby and you got this response back? I don't know. Clever of him if he did. These are hard to shoot. These are little tiny birds. They sit still for microseconds. They are always moving. And the photographer has captured it sharp. He's captured the flower, the bottle brush is sharp, beautiful color. Background looks like it's been darkened in, but still it's gorgeous. And yet it's just a bird on a stick. And it's got to compete with other birds on a stick. You can't get credit because the bird is harder to photograph. You know, among small bird photographers, if that becomes a category, good for you. We've often had misidentifications. What do you do about them? You ding the picture because they put the wrong name on it? I don't know. I suspect what I would do if it was a tie, then the award would go to the one with the right name, but it's nothing about the picture. It's a black crowned night heron, if you didn't know. I call this judge errors and omissions. I don't really know why. Sometimes this is bias. Now, we all have biases. It's no crime, but we need to recognize them. If we're judging, we need to recognize them, and you shouldn't be a victim of them. Positive bias. How many judges will give a higher award to a cute baby rather than another picture that's equally easy to take or hard to take? Hard. Because you got to know you got a bias. Maybe you need to tone it down a little bit on pictures like this. Or like this, anything cute, man, the audience goes, oh. And I grew up near a hog farm. Actually, my relatives own some, and we never took pictures of hogs, small or large. But we should have, that's cute. If your team is being photographed, there's a bias towards them or against the one that's the arch enemy. So just be aware and adjust for it. We had a judge in our club once, and this lady had entered 2 pictures and they both had tongues sticking out. And the judge said, I'm biased against, he didn't use those words, I don't like tongues. And her picture's nothing. So if you have biases like this, bring them in. Would be shame for the photographer not to clip this because he was biased against tongues. Gimmicks. I have a bias against gimmicks. I don't really like them at all, but my goodness, this is so well done. Actually, beautifully done. But it's a gimmick. It is. You may have negative bias or positive bias towards hunting or shooting deer, but you gotta rein it in. I have seen judges with biases. No, bias is the wrong word, with pet interest or concentration of their attention to every one of these subjects, not the same judge. But I saw one judge critiques every single image. She's looking for noise. She goes into the dark parts and she brings it up 4 times the size, looking for noise. Vignettes. Mostly positive, but overdone, they're negative. Like that picture with the coffee plant, that's an overdone vignette. white vignettes. White vignettes are out of style, so judges will typically grade them down. But if you do something and it's wonderful and has a white vignette, you may lose because of the judge. Border Patrol, this means going around the edges and making sure there's nothing white that's extending or drawing your attention away from the subject. There are judges that go crazy over this. There are judges who are preoccupied with wanting to tell you, oh, I don't know where to look. Well, some images don't have a place to look. Some images are just mood. It's what it is. So there's no place to look, but the image still has value. It could be an award winner. Overcooked, overprocessed, and halos. We touched on this before. Definitely going to get dinged for it, and you should. But sometimes some judges go crazy over this. They could start spending not an hour, but a long time looking for stuff. Not that if it's bad, it should tell you quickly. Halos are part of being overcooked and oversaturated, we talked about before. Knowledge. Every one of these subjects has its own, and this is just partial, there are more. Each one of these subjects has its own criteria for what makes a great picture. You've listened to bird photographers, they can go on for hours going through all the ramifications and such. So in this case, birds, planes, astro, flowers, cars, food, still life. Most of your judges aren't going to be experts in all of these. Sometimes they'll be good in some and not in others. But if you had to get an expert that knew all these things, you wouldn't find him. Sometimes if you have big contests, I pushed as hard as I dared with F3C when I was on their competition committee to have a contest just for wildlife, because wildlife was dominating the contest. Because I think it's because mostly fancy cameras make much better wildlife pictures than were possible before. You're like filming and pulling a frame out. So you get these incredible moments. Okay, this is going to be a little controversial, and keep in mind, my opinion. You go down, it's turn season. You go down, you get your 600, 800 millimeter lens, you find a nice place, you get down on the ground and you sit there and you photograph for a couple of hours or more. And you come home, 1,000 pictures maybe, and then you've got 20 that are just for 20. I mean, really nice pictures. What do you do with your local contest? I can tell you what I think you should do. What you should do is enter one that you like. If it wins, hang it up. You've won for that outing. I would recommend you not keep submitting them time after time after time, because it will create some animus among your fellow club members. Karsh was a photographer, and he was either commissioned, hired, or allowed to photograph this gentleman. You see him here, he's trying to learn how to do the V for victory, which way to hold his hands, because they had different meanings. And so he's got back, I'm sorry, back. Okay. He's got 15 minutes to photograph Churchill. Churchill's aide tells him, when he sets up and he starts and Churchill comes in, everything's ready. He's got two assistants, Karsh does. One of them is manning the shutter. One of them is messing with lights. And Karsh is telling Churchill where to sit and where to move his arms and all this. And the aide to Churchill says, we got about 5 minutes left. And Karsh is devastated because he doesn't have anything. So he goes up. He tells his guy on the shutter, get ready. And he goes up to Churchill and he snatches a cigar either out of his mouth or out of his hand or something. And Churchill makes this pose, this reaction to it. And we know the rest, as they say, is history. It even shows up on an American stamp. My point is, Who is the owner of that picture? I think we all agree. No debate, right? Not the guy who pressed the button. You know, movies are made. Directors don't touch the camera. Even the director of photography doesn't touch the camera often. This is a beautiful area. This is the picture. If you're a Windows person with some age, then you saw this picture thousands of times. It was the background before you could change them. And this is Palouse in Washington State. Well, there's a well-known photographer, Tim Gray. He takes workshops out here 2 or 3 times a year, I think. And he's been doing it for 20 plus years. And Tim knows the Palouse. He knows the fields. He knows where to shoot from. He knows that he has friends with all the companies that do crop dusting. He knows the weather. He knows which directions they're flying. He knows what time of day they're going to be there. So he takes his people out. They line up. He suggests, shoot this, this f-stop will work, this speed will work, etc. And you get pictures like this. That's a fine picture. Wish it was mine. But here's the question I ask you. Do you come home and enter it into your contest? Do you really think it's your picture? Look at all the stuff that was done by other people. Same thing. I looked at the ocean thousands of times. I've never seen a horse with a beautiful lady with a flowing dress and hair stringing out behind her, coming out of the surf with the light behind her. Never. And I hand it to doing this. This is wonderful. But is the person who clicked it the real owner of the picture? Is it really their picture? This picture was entered in your contest last year. Picture of a frog. A nice picture. These guys don't sit for you normally. And the background is clean. Frog is obviously the subject. Nice picture. But look what this picture has to compete with in F3C. My goodness. I was very naive. I thought these guys went down to Quito or Costa Rica and they went out in the rainforest and they were lucky. I have friends in Southwest Florida. They said, no, there are workshops down there. The guy has pet frogs and he picks flowers and he puts the frogs on the flower and a nice background with out of focus colors. And you come in and photograph it and pay him a fee. And it's kind of like a workshop. Anyway, one more. How does the guy with the frog from his backyard compete with this? I don't see how. Some clubs, not all the professional groups, they ban workshop photos. They just ban them. It's a simple solution for them, but clubs generally don't. So anyway, I was at this guy's house and I noticed this picture that he had in some stuffy, not on the wall, but just on the floor or something. And I said, it's nice, you should enter this. He said, no, I said, wait, it's a workshop picture. I went out in California or somewhere, Northern California in the snow. And this guy, they drove the horses by and we photographed them. And there were like a dozen of us there. He says, nah, I'd never put that in a competition. That's Gordon Ira if you don't recognize him. Okay, does anybody know what this is a picture of? Somebody does, I know. Go ahead and say it. Karen? You know what that is? Yeah, you. It's an etching of typical scene in a salon, which was the French exhibition that was held annually, or they stopped for wars, they stopped for rebellions, but for 200 and plus years, it was sponsored by the French government. And artists from France and other places submitted their images to be shown here because it was a big honor. And this was their livelihood. And they had a jury, it was the power brokers, if you will, of the art world and the school. And they would judge the images, and they would accept or deny them entry into the salon. And the criterion for getting accepted was to have lifelike and accurate portrayal of something of history, religion, mythology, or life of the upper class. Now, this was a very popular painter who was very successful in the salon. Does anybody know who painted this? I didn't think so. This is Monsonier. He was quite talented and he was very successful at the salon. At one point, he was the highest earning painter in France. This is a gravure of the images, the paintings that are being returned after being refused by the salon. This percentage got up to 75%. Now, you see what's happening. The people who were entering and being refused were not happy. This was their livelihood. So we have 200 plus years of artists complaining about judges. And it continues to this day, and there will never be a solution. So what did the people who were complaining and couldn't get into the salon, they started entering and doing work outside of the salon. So we have people like Monet. Now, this painting of his was nicknamed by one of the journalists in the local paper. He called it an impression of a rising sun, setting sun, Levant, rising, right? So they called them the Impressionists. And they and other groups came along and created this body of work that I think we would all feel very saddened if it didn't exist. And just tell me, I think no one knew Monsonier, but I will guarantee you everybody knows virtually all of these people. Just tell me who painted this. It's easy. It's the easiest one. Monet. Manet. Now, Karen, who painted this? Yes. A little harder. Mary Cassatt. These aren't all impressionists. I didn't mean to give you that impression. This is actually in the Art Institute in their lobby. 10 minutes or 5 minutes? 10? I'll be good. Seurat. Picasso. That's Guernica. Andy Wyatt. Hopper. You know what, but maybe not the picture. This is Georgia O'Keeffe. This one's harder. Mérissault. Berthe Mérissault. He was the only woman to exhibit with the original group of the Impressionists. And this one, Matisse, right? And the Russian, Kandinsky, right? Okay. Through all of the complexity of competitions and pros and cons and how you feel about them, in my experience at the work in being in a camera club in Jacksonville, which is like 15 plus years, this is absolutely true. Any member who joined that club and participated, contests, outings, talks, asked questions, their photography got better to the person, all of them. They went from taking pictures, snapshots, to something more like this. Now, this is what you're faced with when you're getting judges to come. Every single judge that comes and judges for you, and you know, the Jacksonville Club has what, 3, 6, 9, 12, 11 contests a year, something like that. So they see a lot more judges, but every judge comes with different skills, different knowledge, and different training, different life experiences, and different likes and dislikes. And we want them to all judge alike so we can compare one year to another or one time to another, but it's really not possible. I mean, what we really are going to get. Oh, I forgot to say, and we asked them to follow all these rules. You saw some of them earlier, but you know, they're supposed to judge this way or judge that way. Well, some will do it. Some will do whatever the hell they want. And some won't even bother reading the letter. But what is the result of all this from the standpoint of you wanting to evaluate the judges? I would say it wraps up into one word: mayhem. So what do you do in reaction to the mayhem? This is my advice. First of all, do not defend the image. Do not defend your work. This is not my idea. This was Joe McNally, and this is his basic advice to everybody. Don't defend it. You want to, because that judge doesn't know this, and I do. And you listen carefully to his critique. Listen to the words and just internalize them. Keep an open mind. Don't make, you've heard something, this judge is bad. Don't pay attention to that. Judge for yourself. Try to understand from their point of view. This is a really key thing. Don't be discouraged. And remember, they're judging your work. They're not judging you. We've had people take judging comments personally, and they want to leave the club because he said this about me. No, he didn't say it about you. He said it about your work. Different. You know, when you have children, the first time you have a child, you're going, I don't know nothing about this. I got to go read a book. And there's a great book. I forget the guy's name, but it was a Frenchman. And the title was something like Between Child and You, or Between You and the Child, something like that. Anyway, the advice they have in there is never criticize your child. You criticize the child's behavior. It's the same idea here. It's your work that's being criticized, not you. Don't take it personally. Go soldier onward. And I told you earlier not to do cliches. I'm going to violate that now, and I hope you will forgive me. Ready? This is bad. This is so bad. Soldier onward. And remember, there's no crying in photo contests. Thank you. It looks like we have 0 time for questions. Am I right? 5 minutes? Okay, question. Yes. Oh, you didn't hear her question. Her question was, is it better to have more than one judge? Well, I would say in a word, it's better. Is it worth it? I don't know. I did some research, again, from F3C. They got tons of data hidden in away in their computers because they've been doing it for a long time. And I took one group for 1 year, and I looked at the judges' relationship for each image that was judged, each of the 3 judges. And then I took averages of all 3 variations, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, and 2 and 3. It'd be three judges, you get 3 different combinations. So in doing this, And I compared how the changes would have been in the rankings of the images. If you'd only had one in this group and you only had two, it turns out that the sweet spot is probably two. Because there was very little change from 2 to 3, but there was a big change from 1 to 2, regardless of which 2 you were talking about. And it was kind of surprising because there was never any one judge who was always high or always low. It seemed like a certain image affected each judge differently. So you don't want, same one person is just going to skew it more, 2 might be perfect. So do you want to hire 2 judges rather than 1 next year or this year? I don't know, but it's an idea, you know. More questions? I love complaints and I love criticism. I really, that's, no, something you didn't understand, something you disagree with, that'd be even better. You got to be something in here. Okay, Bill.
Who's got the best interview?
Thank you, I think. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, yes. Yes. I don't know. Probably, well, I will take the question and give you a longer answer than you want. When I was working for a living, I know, but I'm getting there. I was a gemologist and doing appraisals. And I was a member of the American Society of Appraisers, which is like a vetted group. And so when you're doing that, you're judging, you're evaluating. So my experience at evaluating stuff is probably 30, 40 years. But photography only, what, 10, 12, something like that.
First one. So today, what is it that you find throughout your life? Something that all of us take on is not changed regardless of all of us spending the last year, but it's never changed.
Can you ask me that question again? Use some slightly different words. I don't understand what.
Oh, say in the entire time that you've been judging, you started judging like 35, 40 years ago till now. You know, you're of course you've improved tenfold because of the knowledge that you've gained. But what is it that you've seen from the picture when you first started judging till now that it's not changed?
The picture itself?
Yeah, like what you think that's never ever changed?
Your perception of the picture, right?
I think opening your mind up to let your feelings take a greater percentage of what you're using to evaluate. I think before I was following the rules a little too tightly. And now I go with feeling and what they're trying to tell me more. And there's another aspect to that too. Some parts of photography have gotten better, not because the photographers are better, but because the tools are better. The fast shutter speeds and focusing systems on some of these new cameras give us wildlife pictures that were before virtually impossible. Go back into the 1970s and 60s and pull wildlife photography books. They look like garbage. They really do. There are things like, why is this here when you and I are taking better pictures than that? This was a professionally produced book. So I don't think I answered your question. Yeah, but I don't think art changes much. I mean, we're excited by seeing these impressionists and other people. I mean, this work was gorgeous. It's become iconic to us. And some of the old photographs, you know, the guy with the wrench and the guys on the girder, those are old pictures. made with old cameras and old technology.
Cut it off.
We're there.
We have to. First of all, thank you